Old man Bezos had a farm, AI, oh dear. Large language models, generative AI, the Torment Nexus, whatever you want to call it, big technology is betting the farm and indeed global civilization on a giant hallucination engine that's been trained on every utterance of human expression since the dawn of time, or at least since the dawn of Reddit, in order to vomit it all back onto us in the name of progress. And as it turns out, that's not a great idea. It's a technology that was originally sold to us as the next great leap forward in human ingenuity, a new industrial revolution where a glorified guessing machine handles all the bullshit we don't want to do, like communicating or thinking, which frees us up for more important stuff like sitting around, doing cool flips, texting Chris Pratt about our bowel movements, that reminds me, etc, etc. And if you don't like it, you're a Luddite who hates progress. You're a robot racist. You just need to get with the program, man. It's happening. It's inevitable, yeah? That's not just idiots on the cesspit formerly known as Twitter. That's how the big stakeholders of this are selling it now.
We will have to work through societal disruption.
Not, here's a tool that increases your productivity in these demonstrable ways. Not in terms of its benefits at all, such as they are, but in terms of, hey, this is happening whether you like it or not. We're in far too deep to slam the brakes on this thing, so even though we know you all hate it, tough shit. Daddy needs a new yacht. And of course, because the games industry is this vast intersection of bleeding edge technology and artistic expression, it has already been irrevocably changed by generative AI and the endless pursuit to find a use case for it that isn't AGM PowerPoint horseshit. Our pokey little hobby is at the vanguard of this frightening new paradigm, and 2026 is when it really is set to become truly unavoidable. So here's 7 reasons why AI will ruin gaming as we know it this year, because we love a positive mental attitude around here, you know? Number 1, games will be worse. Firstly, for reasons I've already touched on, as generative AI is crowbarred into the production pipeline for almost every video game, we're going to start to see its fingerprints everywhere. Already it's evident in tons of key art. That's the sort of stuff you see on posters or thumbnails in storefronts, with all the hallmark mistakes and characteristic uncanniness of generative imagery. Sometimes you really can judge a book by its cover. This stuff doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the product it's advertising. It's full of silly mistakes, it's careless, and in the truest sense of the phrase, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The industry proponents of Gen AI, usually CEOs in a desperate bid to find a use case for this nonsense that isn't bunkum, are often quick to insist that AI is only being used for things like prototyping, concept art, brainstorming, you know, that inconsequential, trifling bit of creative work where you come up with all the ideas. Yeah, we can just offload that to a speak and spell, no problem. More and more games are shipping with this stuff embedded in the final product as in-game assets, 3D models, textures, voiceovers, and things you can't see like the underlying code, the scripting, the pre-production documentation, the autonomous vending machine that programmers get their T-bone steak roasters from. And this year, it's going to really ratchet up, and like the annoying people who evangelize this stuff love reminding us, this shit is going to be inescapable. The rot runs deep, and it starts right at the beginning of the entire creative process now. And whether you care or not, that's bad. The human factor, the soul, the ingenuity, genius, and power of invention wielded by the raw, imperfect, impossibly vast bundles of neurons that are piloting our meat suits in a galaxy of endless wonders to feel things and remember them and turn them into stories, being sidelined in favour of cocaine Alexa, that's bad. And some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, at least it means there'll be more video games coming out, right? Because AI just makes things faster, right? Wrong. Games will be cancelled. We already have a very high profile example of a game being shit-canned in order to feed the insatiable beast of AI. The massive restructuring undertaken by Microsoft of all parts of its business last year that resulted in thousands of layoffs killed off the promising Perfect Dark reboot and Rare's long-awaited Everwild, both of which were at one point seen as vital to revitalizing the Xbox brand by finally leveraging the things it owns in order to make games for its console. What a concept. We now know, however, that that aspiration has been ditched in favour of turning Xbox into more or less another big multi-platform publisher like Ubisoft or Electronic Arts, as pressure mounts on every Microsoft division to sell all the family silver in order to funnel money into OpenAI. just so your dad can ask his laptop when Matlock is on and have a 50% chance of receiving a correct answer. It's not just Microsoft who are at it. Meta just this month closed a bunch of its VR game studios, effectively killing an untold number of upcoming Quest VR games and making over 1,500 people redundant in the process. Again, in order to fund a massive AI pivot to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. There was a perception a while ago that AI game development could, in theory, increase productivity in the sector so much that more games would end up being made and there would be less time between landmark releases. Like, hey, imagine it was 3 years between Elder Scrolls games instead of 17 or whatever it is now.
Is there a way we can use it faster?
However, it seems to be that the AI revolution is actually just gutting the games industry of talent and destroying it. But, I hear you ask, for the last 10-15 years we've been told about the ballooning cost of game development being unsustainable. Surely AI will bring those costs down and in turn maybe even make the games cheaper to buy than the eye-watering 70 quid they're now going for. Right? No, obviously. Games won't even be cheaper. What we're seeing in games development is that any cost savings achieved by crowbarring AI into the pipeline are wiped out by having to fix its mistakes. That's the first thing. The math ain't mathing. It was reported last year by Business Insider that EA's in-house AI game development tool ReefGPT, use of which is mandated throughout the company at every level, is actually causing more problems than it solves. More on that later. But the chief thing to keep in mind here is that AI isn't free to use. Businesses aren't using the free tier of ChatGPT to do this stuff. They're ploughing eye-watering sums of money into AI pivots, which could be licensing existing tools or creating their own large language models on the promise that eventually it'll work well enough to replace all their human employees, and the theory that the cost of maintaining all this stuff will work out cheaper than a wage bill. One day. To be clear, this is a gamble. A massive gamble on technology that notoriously is not even close to breaking even. Building, running and maintaining the vast data centers required to keep this stuff going is requiring huge amounts of energy, water, rare earth elements and regular cash injections from all over the place, because if that bubble pops, it's going to be bad news for everyone. More on that later as well. The cost to the end user, especially business customers, is only going to go up as a return on investment is desperately sought by the CEOs involved. And if there are ever any real cost savings to be had in game development, they're not going to be passed on to you, the consumer. They're going to be passed on to stakeholders, shareholders, CEO bonuses. You, the gamers, are not going to benefit from any of this. But that doesn't matter because you're not going to have the hardware to play games on anyway. It's a field of sheep because there's no RAM. Hardware costs are skyrocketing. We're already seeing massive increases in RAM prices as the firms that manufacture it are earmarking future stock for data centers. Micron, a huge RAM and SSD manufacturer, is pulling out of the consumer market entirely because frankly, they stand to make a lot more money from over-leveraged AI firms building data centers with monopoly money than they do from your wee brother building a sick gaming rig. And as a result, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 now costs over £400, which to be clear is insane. As someone pointed out on social media recently, RAM is currently unaffordable because the stuff that isn't made yet is being earmarked for data centers that don't exist yet. It's an impossible situation. And it's not just RAM, it's everything. Storage, GPUs, CPUs. Remember when crypto made the cost of graphics cards shoot upwards? Well, this is that on steroids. And obviously, it's not just more expensive for you, it's more expensive for Asus, or Asus, I don't know how you pronounce that, and Valve, and Sony, and Nintendo, and Microsoft. All consumer electronics is creeping up in price. By the middle of this year, it might retroactively look like a smart move to have spent £700 on a PS5 Pro in 2025, like I did because I'm a big stupid dick. And anything that makes PS5 Pro owners look savvy is just interdimensionally stupid. I can't believe this is the timeline we're in. Eventually, you won't have any hardware to run games on locally. You can forget hobbyist gaming. The only way to play anything made after 2029 will be via cloud gaming. You know, that horrid thing that sucks that we all hate. The market People have rejected it time and time again, but very soon, because of the prohibitive cost of building anything more powerful than a cheap Android tablet, renting time on the cloud will be your only access to the kind of personal computing you have today. That's not just for games, that's for everything. Your desktop, your local apps, your file storage. You will not outright own a single part of the chain, and it will always be under someone else's control. Your digital library will be at the mercy of contract law that could expire at any time, and losing access to things you've bought will become even more common than it is now, which is frankly too much. There's a significant possibility here that when the computing devices you have in your house right now, your PC, your PS5, your Xbox, whatever, when they eventually stop working, there won't be any backstops. There won't be any alternatives. Techno-feudalism will have arrived, and Jeff Bezos will own you. Remaining talent will be wasted. To go back to the AI pivot in game dev for a moment, what these big firms are essentially doing is getting their existing staff to train the T1000 robot that's going to replace them. And they're doing this by simply forcing everyone to use it, correcting all of its mistakes and hallucinations as they go. The job of doing this is becoming a massive drag on everyone's productivity and efficiency and job satisfaction and morale. People are spending more time fixing garbage output than they would just doing things properly in the first place. Again, pivoting to a full-blown AI workflow isn't just flicking a switch. It's a massive, probably years-long process, one that very likely ends in tears, frankly. The C-suite wet dream of magically having no wage bill but somehow endless product to sell is obviously the kind of absolute brain rot that you can only snort off a toilet cistern. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt for a moment and assume that this will pan out for them eventually. Which it won't, but we're just pretending. Even if it works, this is throwing the baby out with the bathwater on an industrial scale. We're talking a baby the size of the Chrysler building, because once you've trained your perfect AI to make the shit you were already making up until 2026, that's it. There's no more innovation, no more ingenuity, no more human factor. That system will just regurgitate the same stuff at you forever. There's a hard ceiling where the fundamental limitations of the technology and the data you feed it cannot continue to improve. And at that point, in order to start having new ideas, new concepts, new ways of playing, new stories, new characters, new anything, you'll have to start hiring people again. And by that point, all of that expertise, all of that combined thousands of years of experience you'll have discarded in order to feed the beast, all of that talent you've basically stolen and trapped in a mimicry box, those human beings, they won't come back and work for you. They might not even be around anymore. The future of the games industry or any creative industry will have been sacrificed to sustain a fad, a folly, which admittedly might not even matter because there won't be any customers. Who will be around to buy games anyway? If everyone except CEOs, plumbers and electricians ends up out of a job, what is the end game for capitalism here? The forces foisting this bleak new age of techno-feudalism upon us are dyed-in-the-wool ultra-capitalists, so you can forget about universal basic income. That's not in the game plan. In fact, I don't think there is a plan. These are people who think that the talking computer that can build you Red Dead Redemption 12 from a single voice prompt is the core aspirational idea of Star Trek.
What is our function here?
Not the unlimited energy that enables a socialist utopia where everyone has their needs taken care of and self-improvement is the only currency in a post-scarcity society that has abandoned the use of money. Not exploring what it means to be human against the backdrop of a vast, unknowable cosmos full of wonder. Just the bit where you have a subservient AI running everything and you don't have to pay anyone to do things. They haven't thought any further ahead than that because they're idiots, which is why we're in a situation where global order is collapsing to prop this shit up. The Gen AI bubble is propping up the entire global economy at the moment. Yes, this thing for which there is no concrete use case beyond speed reading Google results for the chronically impatient is currently the most important growth industry on the planet. And in order to sustain it, national governments and the world's largest corporations are having to invest billions into building more and more data centers to handle the demand. The numbers are insane. Like, in order to start breaking even, OpenAI is going to need something like half the internet users on the planet to start paying up for ChatGPT, which, considering most of us begrudge the idea of paying for actual real content that actual real people make, is a real stretch. But if the bubble bursts, it takes us all out with it. Vast networks of investor cash, pretend money that investment banks are loaning people on the assumption that this thing won't ever crash. It's tea leaves and prayer beads. You might as well bet the entire global economy on Spurs winning the league. I'm told that's a good football joke. And those data centers, as I've mentioned, require vast amounts of precious and finite resources to build and run. They also require tons of water and energy to keep cool. So let's not beat about the bush here. What's the shopping list for the ideal location to build the world's biggest data centers? Somewhere where you can get oil, somewhere where you can get rare earth metals, somewhere that's bloody cold, somewhere that's easier to defend from Russian incursion than Alaska. I mean, that sounds like Greenland. Greenland is the ideal place to annex if you're a crypto gangster whose entire grip on power depends on money getting funneled into ChatGPT. So, if you don't like the idea of being brought to the brink of World War III just so a bunch of LinkedIn wankers can write even more pointless emails, you shouldn't accept AI as inevitable. You should demand disclosure whenever it's used so you can make an informed choice as a consumer. At the moment, game studios are still finding that the PR fallout from AI usage is more hassle than any of the supposed benefits. And so, once again, our little hobby finds itself as the canary in the coal mine for a coming tsunami of dog shit. And if you think I'm talking rubbish and still sitting there wondering why you should care about AI, let me just ask you this. Let's bring it down to brass tacks. Why should you buy something that nobody could be bothered to actually make? Why would you read a book that the supposed author couldn't be bothered to actually write? Isn't that insulting your intelligence? Isn't that taking your time and money for granted even more than these firms already do? Bottom line, the absolute best case scenario with AI, this is assuming it works in the way that its proponents insist it will work. The absolute best case scenario is that it puts hundreds of thousands of people, possibly millions, out of work. And the worst case scenario is we all end up as sheet glass as our sons are drafted into a land war with Mozambique for lithium. And when people tell you that AI is inevitable, just get over it, that's the future they're talking about. A binary choice between ruin or oblivion. Not that oblivion. The only sensible choice is to choose neither. And get rid of the f***ing thing.